Welcome to Chapter 1, Access Control, Authentication, Public Key. Lesson 1, Access Control Framework. So what does access mean? It just means putting information together, giving someone access to it. And access control, it allows us to put information so someone who we want to get on the system gets on, and who we don't want to get on the system stays off. It's protecting our network. It's protecting our data. Same way as your door that you have in your house. You don't want intruders in without you knowing who they are. Well, this is the same way. A network needs to be protected. You read about it all the time in the network, in the world. Who just got hacked for this or that. They're looking for information. Information is key. So we're going to start out. Define authorization and access to an information technology infrastructure based on an access control policy framework. So that's what we're kind of looking at. How does all this come together? Some key concepts, access control policies we're going to look at, standards, procedures, and guidelines. We have to follow some federal laws, federal and state laws, fundamental access control information. It allows us what we have in here. So what we're going to be looking at is access control. Enables an authorized person, stress authorized person, to control access to an area of resources in a given physical facility or computer-based information system. So basically, it's someone who enables other people to get on a network to specific areas. So if I have the accounting department, I don't want sales to be able to get into accounting, so only accounting people. If you have HR, only certain people will have access to it. As the IT administrator, we grant those accesses to make sure that people don't go where they don't belong. And that's the whole idea of what this is. It's keeping our data secure, keeping it safe. Even within the company, you can have prying eyes, someone who wants to go see how much people make or whatever. So this is why we can't have total access to everyone around the world. So, as I was saying, people need access to certain objects within the same or different systems. Sensitive data, human resources, payroll, mergers, acquisitions, senior level managers, top management. They need to have certain areas in place that they can go to that they know no one else can go. And on the network, as you know, because you've covered the networking, anyone can get anywhere on the network. And by having access control, it limits who can get where and when. You can even set it up that there's only certain times that people can get somewhere. So, if we don't have access control, this is what happens. Anyone can see what we have. And that's a bad thing. Whether you're in HR, whether you're in accounting or top management or even certain departments, you don't want anyone to have access to everything in your system. And that's what this whole thing right here, access control. We can limit who sees HR, who sees accounting. So only accounting people. This is what we're trying to do, protect our information so no one can see it. And that's all we're trying to do, is get it protected. So, over the last couple of years, about 99% applications have some kind of vulnerabilities. That's a big problem. That means someone can get into it. And we don't want that. And that's what we're trying to prevent. Here are some unauthorized directory access. Remote code execution. This is not a good thing either. SQL injection, someone's changed stuff. But you can see the breakdown of how people have gotten into systems, and we need to prevent that from happening. It's all done through access control. So basically it's three components: policy, subjects, and objects. Policies defined from laws, requirements, industry guidelines. Subjects, people who need the access when they need it. And resources, or objects, resources, or information that needs to be protected. So that's pretty much what it comes down to. The policy is what the company has. This is how we're going to protect it. If you're in accounting, you can't see sales. If you're in sales, you can't see accounting. That's part of our policy. Subjects, the user, the network, So whoever's on the network, whoever it can be, it can even be system, applications that are run to check stuff. And the objects are the resources we need to protect. That's all this comes down to. So we do have federal laws, state laws, and industry guidelines that we will follow because they all have a state with it. If you work for information, with information such as in the doctor's office, you have HIPAA laws that we have to follow. We have to save so much information. If we're a publicly traded company, we have to save emails and information, but we can't let anyone see them, so we have to follow federal laws and guidelines that allow us to have it. So access, some other areas, access control systems, subject control systems, and this is all we're looking at. It's the same type of information that we're trying to get this in. So this is what we're going to look at. Identification. How do we know who is getting in when we want them? So you're going to have a login and password. You might have key fobs. You might have biometrics. We're going to cover all that later in the class. But who are we going to identify to get in, and how are we going to do that? Usually, most 90% of the people use a login and password. Well, that's what the standards are. Authentication. How do we know who that person is? How do we authenticate that? You might want to use a key fob. Where I worked, if I were dialed in remotely, I had key fobs that I would have to put in. An authorization. After they clear their checks, we can get them in. And that's what we want. Decision, or we can deny them. If they don't meet what we need, it will be denied. So here it is. Identification. Check. How are we checking? Well, I know it here, driver's license. We're not going to use driver's license, but they should have a login and password. Is it on our system? Authentication. That's what I said. And then authorization. Yes, they're on our system. We will let them in. So here, if we're going to have a new employee, he's going to go to the manager, get information. He's going to go to HR, get the account set up. HR will then approve it. Then the manager approves the access, then receives the information, initial login and password. IT will create it. And you see down here. And then they're only going to have access to a very small area on our hard drive. It is not much for initial password. Usually also initial passwords need to be changed. You've got to keep that in mind. So what does the process look like when we look at it from a big picture? The manager, and you have the network administrator or the service desk that's going to create the account. They're going to go through and make sure that it meets all our policies before the end user can get in. So identification, account, password, tokens, biometrics, whatever we want to use. We have authentications, receives it, compares it to what we have saved, right? We're not sitting there with the paper and pen. All right, let's check your password. It's all done on system. It's done through databases, most of it, and it's checked that way. And then before everything, they check the identity. We authorize it. We authenticate it. Then we authorize it. After it's authorized, it's the only time it goes. You got to remember, this happens very quickly. This is not a long, drawn-out thing. It happens in milliseconds, so people can work. So, what are we looking at? The identity of the subject proven by the name. So, who is being identified? How are we going to identify it? Login, password, biometrics. That allows us what it is. What is the presence of a specific device or token? So, who we're identifying as a person, what is how we're going to identify them, when. Combined with those two, combined with who they are and what they are, with how they're going to think, how are they going to do it, we can grant them access. And it can be during a one-time period. It can be denied another. So you can say they're only allowed on between this time and that time. Or if the system, they no longer need to get there. If they change positions, you need to change where they sit. And where? their physical location, or where are they located. We need to know that. And what's the purpose of them getting access to this? Do we need it to do their job? Is it a one-time deal? So we need to look at the why also. And then what type of access? For some people, it could be a read-only. We don't want them to have tons of information. We just want them to say, hey, you know what? You're only going to be able to read this information. Or are they administrative? They're going to have read-write ability, add people. Could they be an author? Can they write changes? Or they might be able to have no access. So these are the different options that we have when setting up access control. We can also set up a group access. The group access allows us to set, so we don't have to do it by individual. Anyone in HR has access to HR, all HR files. These are some of the things that we have. So some of the logical controls, how things might be broken down. The data element, this is the lowest level of information-based access. So basically it's a database table that contains social security numbers. You may need to place special restrictions on the data. Or it might be a table. You also could define who has access to this database table. You grant users access to the table containing employment information, order information, or other types. So if I have order information, I'm going to want sales to look at it. If I have HR information, I want HR to look at it and no one else. So I can actually break down what I need. Database. You can also define an entire database if I want. Say, all right, here's the IT department. You have access to all this. Everyone else is blocked out. Or you can have read-only access to databases. So we can actually break it down slightly different. We can also set up applications set up access control for applications. And what this allows us to do is say, all right, anyone in sales has access to this application that only sales team use. Someone in marketing, they can only access this application. So instead of getting into the detailed levels, we can say just these people have applications in. Or systems. System is also a security object. For example, you may restrict access to the CEO's laptop. Only CEO can get on it. No one else can log in. Usually you can have multiple people log in. So we want to keep that computer locked down so only he can get to it. Operating systems. So this provides us some information. If someone brings their own computer or everything on it, that we want them to have a special operating system. We can have write protection on the file, subdirectories, restrictions, so it allows us to have it, and they can have information. Also the network. It provides access restrictions for resources stored on a network and subnetwork. It provides the ability to transfer information. So these are different types of access control we can have. So here's our user. We want to get them over to file so they can view this file. So first they have to come through the network. Then they have to have access to the file that we need. So to get through the first part, which is our network right here, then they get to the file. Once they get to here, they still have very limited access. They can only see a certain amount, which is this file. They don't have access to everything. So authentication elements. Something you know, we need to have a password, PIN ID, or something like that. Something you are. So you can have biometrics, fingerprints, retina, or you can have the dongles. So this one is pretty simple, right? This is what probably 90% of everyone uses. Login and password. You have to have this. This is becoming more popular. Dongles have been around, and they are very useful also, but you got to carry them with you. Some companies don't like that. If they get lost, it's a problem. But whatever your level is, that's what you need to know. As I said, something you know, the password is the most common. You use it for your ATMs, your logins, for your email, your bank accounts online. So it allows you to have all that information. Something you have. As I said, it's a physical device. It's that token. I'm sorry, it's the visual, your biometrics, your fingerprint. It allows you to have it. And something is your token. So in summary, Access control policy, standards, procedures, and guidelines. We covered that we really have to follow federal and state compliance laws and also industry standards. Fundamental access control, identification, authentication, and authorization. These are the areas that we need to look at. Chapter 1. Thank you.